Just before the War of 1812, one daring pioneer from New York began his journey to a part of our country that was seeing its very first settlers. With Thomas Jefferson as president and tensions rising between Britain and the newly formed United States of America, Ezra Beebe arrived in what was known as the Western Reserve. And so began the history of Perry. Perry has always been known for its rich soil, sprawling farms, and productive nurseries. But before Perry was even founded, it served a different purpose for Native Americans. With abundant natural vegetation, Perry was able to support large deer herds and many other types of wild game, making it a suitable place for American Indians to settle.
This was a great hunting ground for Indians. The North Ridge and the South Ridge formed natural paths to Pennsylvania. You know, the old lake shores were ideal for hunting grounds, so they had Indian paths along there before they had paved roads. The Indians would follow these routes, either trading, you know, with Indians to the west or east, and also hunting, because it was a perfect area to hunt deer. What's particularly interesting is there doesn't seem to be any evidence of warfare in this area. So somehow we could have 12 tribal groups, you know, hunting peacefully together. And what's important is they inhabited this land so many years, and they lived off nature. They didn't pollute. They relished the resources, and it's something we could probably learn from nowadays.
By the time Perry was settled in 1815, nearly all of the Native Americans had left the area, largely because of American treaties. Some traveled west, while others traveled north to Canada. Of the few that did remain, there is no record of any interaction with the early settlers.
I think in the history books of Lake and Geauga County, the earliest settler here is known to be Ezra Beebe. He was born in 1737. And probably came from the state of New York, and so it is written. He settled in 1808 or 1810 on South Ridge Road near the Grand River in a little log cabin he built there, the southwestern part of it, which is now the township. He died in 1813 and was laid to rest in the cemetery of the Axtell Farm that was located at the corner of Webb Road and South Ridge Road. And later his remains were taken and buried into the Perry Center Road Cemetery.
The inscription on Beebe's tombstone at Perry Township Center Road Cemetery reads, "The past, the awful scene of death is o'er, and life is gained to last forevermore."
Perry was established in 1815, on July 1st, 1815. It came out of the Western Reserves. All the townships were made up of 25 square miles. So Perry Township was established in 1815. Out of that came Perry Village in 1913. And the North Perry Village was established in 1914. So we really have three Perrys, which were all at one time made up of Perry Township.
It was rather sparsely populated, mostly just farms and agricultural use in the area. Old maps do indicate, though, that there were sawmills in several different locations. One was actually here in this park area. There was a sawmill. Also, in the mid-1850s, there was a shingle factory on Antioch Road. So other than that, though, not a lot of people, not very many houses. It was difficult to traverse the area. The soil is very sandy and loamy, so in the late winter, early spring, would be difficult to travel the roads.
Well, the name was controversial, and it still remains today. But I've read the different history books that point to, was named in honor of Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry, who was the war hero of 1812. Some say it was Isaac Perry. In the book of Lake County history, you'll find that Perry was named for Isaac Perry. Not so, because Isaac Perry did not migrate here until 1822, and which the township had already been established and named Perry Township. And like Madison Township became Madison, Painesville Township became Painesville. So our Lake County historian Jack Daniels confirmed that it was Commodore Hazard Perry.
As the town's population grew, Perry built mills, stores, and churches. However, most of their income came from the rich soils of their farmland and pastures. It wasn't long before trains were able to leave Perry carrying grains, milk, and passengers to surrounding cities.
Perry Village was a typical agricultural small town. The farmers would bring their grains and the milk from the cows to the train station, and the train station would dispatch mail and the goods to Cleveland.
It was an accommodation, of course. It picked up milk, the milk cans. I suppose I was maybe around 8 years of age when I really remember some of what was going on. It seems to me as though most of the roads were still unpaved. The area itself was grown up with nursery, the old Stores and Harrison Nursery. I can recall that going down Hale Road, coming up to Lane Road, you probably didn't pass any more than about 8 houses. I had a smaller sister, a younger sister, and we would always ask to go over to the railroad tracks. Maybe once or twice I had seen the old accommodation stop, and there was usually somebody getting on, somebody getting off. Mr. Farasato at the time had his tailor shop in Cleveland or worked for a larger concern. And he would, in the morning, get into Cleveland, and then in the evening, get off the train at his little stand. It was a train of that did anything and everything, you might say.
So early businesses in Perry catered to agricultural needs. There were sheet metal shops, the Tribbies, coal to provide the heat for the businesses and the housing. A couple hardware stores, John Brown's store, barber store. There was an early bank. There were warehouses for the grains. The Langshaws had a grocery store in downtown Perry. I think it closed about 1969. So he had everything to be self-sufficient. This was the era before the malls, when people actually came downtown in order to procure their needs.
The Old Red Mill was built in 1840 by Jamail Parmalee, who was a large landowner in the area. He was a pretty prominent person at that time. Obviously, Parmalee Road was named after him, Parmalee House, Parmalee Mansion. So, anyways, he built the mill in 1840, and originally it was a 2-story structure, and it was so successful that they eventually added a 3rd story on. And all the pictures that we have actually show it depicted with the 3 stories. We don't have any with the 2 stories. The dam was handmade, and because of heavy flooding, it would occasionally collapse, and they'd have to rebuild it. And finally, that was the demise of the mill. I guess it collapsed one too many times, and the owner didn't want to bother refurbishing it, and so let the building go into disrepair. And then it was finally raised in 1923.
People mainly farmed. There wasn't any, they didn't even have the nurseries that they have in Lake County now. And a lot of nurseries are a dominant economy for here in Perry. But most of the people just farmed, raised their families, went to church, sent their kids to school, and was a community effort. If something happened, a disaster, or somebody needed a house built or a barn raised or something, everybody pitched in and helped.
Back in the 30s and 40s, you had a lot of truck gardening. Down north particularly, they weren't up on 84, but Antioch Road was all truck farms. And on Route 20, they was Padulas, and there was another farmer, I can't think of their name, but he sold out rather early. That's where he owned where Perrywood allotment is. And of course on Narrows Road you had Herbert Langshaw, and his dad farmed a lot of acres there. And they did truck farming and hauled it to Cleveland. That was a primary occupation, was vegetables, some fruit.
The beginnings of Perry First Baptist Church actually start right around 1813 with a group that at one time some of the history books refer to as the Lockwood Church. Actually, it was a Lockwood family, which Lockwood Road is named after. The church started there basically in the homes as the missionary who was called Elder Hartwell. As he made his way through, he came through Perry twice. He came through the first time, met with the Lockwood Church, met with the Lockwood group, went on to Toledo through the Massachusetts Missionary Society, and then returned to Perry. As in his own words, he said there was a Baptist presence already in Perry and felt that it would make for a grand church. So he came back somewhere in the 1820s is when he returned, and then the church was formally formed. The Lockwood group continued to run missionary societies and educational societies separate from the church, which was the custom of the day.
After they moved the church down here, and they didn't have a full-time minister, they used people who were available or who came through on the circuit riders for their preaching. So they had this Mr. Hartwell who came from Massachusetts that lived here in Perry. He would be their preacher, and they subscribed or wanted to get a preacher of their own. So they sent out a call, as they call it, for a minister. And they had an offer from a Mr. Davies, who came here, said he would come here in September, but he needed a parsonage. At that time there was these two lots that this house and the church was built on was donated by this Mr. Hartwell. And they figured they'd have plenty of time to build a parsonage later on. Well, it didn't work that way. So they had to get busy and subscribe for more money and put this house together. And there was a duplicate of this house for the Baptist Church in Geneva, which no longer stands. That building has been demolished. But this house was built in 1876 for the cost of $2,000. It has 10-foot ceilings in the main floor and 9-foot ceilings on the second floor. And it's all original. It's been modified since we bought it just for comfort. But as far as what you see, woodwork and so on and so forth is original. There's hardwood floors in the whole house, about 4-inch boards. And then when the later years, the church used this building as a Sunday school rooms for their children. So they put 3/4-inch plywood down and tiled it. So they covered up the hardwood floors. And then after we bought it, we took them off upstairs and went back to the natural flooring, so that it is available to be seen.
The history of Perry schools dates back to when Perry was first settled. Before the very first schoolhouse was built, children were educated in their homes. But as the population grew, so did the need for an organized school system.
The first term of school in Perry Township was begun in 1815. It was in a log cabin on South Ridge Road, just west of Maple Street, and it was taught by Adolphus Mason at that time. And as the community grew and more settlers came into the Perry Township area, they began other one-room schools whenever they had 6 to 12 children from 1st through 8th grade ages. They would start those schools, and they built till they had 10 one-room schools in Perry, mostly log cabins. Eventually they built wood frame buildings that really were one-room schools, and some of those eventually became little brick schoolhouses. They built brick schoolhouses. 7 of those original 10 schools still exist in Perry. They are residences that people own and live in. One is a bar, at least that I know, that's closest to my house. But that's how the schools began.
Narrows Road. That's the only school building there was. You know, the first graduating class I can remember, my neighbor Merle Warren graduated. There's 4 or 5 in it. But I can remember the talk in the neighborhood. They had to buy a chair for him to sit in. And that was quite an expense, you know, for those days. I think he graduated the first graduation class. Of course, it was held in the gym. And it had a gym, and you had a stage off the gym. And, of course, in the wintertime, they used to have motion pictures down there. And Miss Sokol used to play the piano, you know, silent film. Of course, that was very interesting. They used to have plays put on the Odd Fellows Hall, about 10 of them, I think, 8 or 10 of them. That was well attended.
Well, there was a lot of controversies, I understand, because many of the people didn't want their children to have to transport any distance. So when you're consolidated into one school, you had to transport those students from all over Perry Township and the 2 villages to bring them to that school. It improved education in Perry in the sense that you could offer more subjects. The teachers could teach 1 subject or 2 instead of having to teach everything like you did in the one-room school. So it did improve the quality of education, although my parents had a pretty good education in the one-room schools. There's basically the 3 R's, but they learned them quite well.
I went there 3 years. I think there's 28 in the school. We didn't have any electricity, you know. We had coal oil lamps, 3 of them on either side of the room, and of course the teacher had one. And we would go to school, we'd enter the clothes room, or we'd take our clothes off when it was warm enough. There was a pail of water with a dipper in it. We all drank from the same pitcher, same dipper. And of course it was hot with a regular furnace, no electricity, so it was just axes of the heat from as it raised, come down and circulated. In winter time, I can remember the snow used to build up on the windowsills on the inside. And of course, we all sat there with all our clothes on. We didn't take them off. Of course, we had outside restrooms. That's where Sears and Roebuck come in.
The building we currently have, we really have to credit to the fact that the power plant was built in Perry, which gave us tax revenue that we would not have had otherwise. I was serving on the school board at the time, and the big decision we had was how to utilize the new tax revenue in the best way for the long distance. For kids that would be way out into the future, and we expected the community to grow significantly because of good schools, because of reasonable taxes, and it was a good distance from Cleveland, and the residential area was growing out this way. We decided that we did want to build an entirely new facility rather than renovate. We'd already renovated the Main Street Consolidated School, made that into a junior high school, and so that was in pretty good condition. But for the long term, it was much more logical to build a new facility, and the best way to do that would be to have them all connected, to have the high school, elementary, and middle school all connected in a campus, so that you'd only have to have one gymnasium, for example, a major one.
and the kids could all come over for the swimming pool and the theater without having to be bused. So the elementary children today can go from their school into the theater facility or other things that are in the high school simply by walking down the hallway. And so that was one of the goals we had, was to keep it consolidated as a campus. We wanted to build it on the land adjacent to the old high school because we already own a good piece of property there, and we obtained an additional 40 acres to build the new facility, and so that's how it came about. And that opened in 1991, the high school, the new high school.
Many of the facts and photos we've used to produce this program were provided by the Perry Historical Society. The Historical Society was formed in 1992 and ever since has been collecting pieces of Perry history with hopes that one day they can provide our community with a complete documentation in the form of a book.
In 1991, I was doing a research project for the township. John Heiss was doing research on his home. And somehow we got together. Someone had recommended that John had some knowledge about the looking for what I was researching. And so I called him up, we got together, and talked about the history was not being preserved in Perry. I was concerned because in this town hall here, all the records of the township were kept upstairs. And being a township clerk, I was concerned. I used to haul up all the records up to the attic, and it was one big mess. I thought if something ever caught this building on fire, all the records would be gone.
I was doing research for a school project with my kids. When they were in the 7th grade, they had to do a Perry report. And so I went to the library and helped them with their research, and I just became fascinated. So I told the librarian there, I said, it's just a shame all this history just sitting here and no one's doing a thing with it. And I said, if anybody ever does, give me a call.
So we decided between us to try to do something about preserving the history. So we got together, 9 of us, at the Perry Public Library in 1992. And at that point, it was the beginning of our Perry Historical Society.
A couple people got together and said, hey, let's do something with Perry history. And called a meeting, and here we are, all these years later.
We hope you've enjoyed this brief look into the past. If you would like to help in the effort to preserve our heritage and create a book documenting Perry's rich history, please visit the Perry Historical Museum at 3885 Main Street in Perry, or call them at 259-4541. If you have pictures or stories you would like to share with us, we'd like to hear from you. You can check out the website at www.webzar.com/perryhistorical. Find out how you and your family or business can sponsor this once-in-a-lifetime project and become a permanent part of this historical publication. For the Perry Channel, I'm Joe Pohl. Thanks for watching.
Hi, I'm Don Densmore, former Perry School Board member. To celebrate the rich history of our schools and community, the Perry Historical Society and the Perry Public Schools are joining forces to write a book, and we need your help. Over the next 2 years, we will be collecting research and looking for your assistance in gathering the stories, documents, and pictures that will capture the rich heritage of Perry. Here is what you can do to give us a hand. Send us an email or give us a call with a story to tell, pictures, books, newspapers, or school publications, or maybe the name of someone to interview, or suggestions of places to look for information that will take us back to the early days of Perry. Anything that provides historical information about our schools would also be greatly appreciated. Contact us through the Perry School Board office at 259-3881 or through the website at www.perry-lake.k12.oh.us. The product of our collective work will preserve our history and give future generations so much enjoyment. Thank you for your help.